Hey guys, in this video, I'm going to bring you the most disturbing and intriguing real story posted on Reddit this year. So grab a coffee and dive into this story. I got home around 11 p.m. The early morning at the office turned into an even later night at the bar. About 4 drinks in and I'm tired, almost ready to sleep as I stumble through the door. I lay down on the couch, grab a cigarette, and light it while I go on YouTube on my laptop. I'm in the middle of a video, almost dozing off when I hear the front door open. I sit up and turn my head slightly, just enough to see my roommate coming in. He hangs his coat in the closet, says nothing, and walks slowly to his room, which is normal. I've been living with him for about 3 months, long enough to notice most of his tendencies and quirks. The guy really doesn't talk unless spoken to, which was far from a problem for me. He also usually kept things clean on his side, never causing much trouble. I really couldn't complain. So, I go back to watching YouTube, and about 5 minutes later, I hear his bedroom shower turn on. Again, nothing strange. At this point, I'm watching boxing highlights, almost falling asleep. I remember waking up in the dark, my head hurting, my throat dry as hell. I sat up slowly, waiting for the dizziness to stabilize. When it did, I grabbed my phone and checked the time. Around 3:30 a.m., as far as I remember. I was starving, so I got up and started walking toward the fridge. And then I noticed it. A soft, yet ever-present noise in the background. It took me a few seconds to really recognize what it was. The shower. Suddenly, the events of the previous night began replaying in my head. Drinking at the bar, getting an Uber home, laptop, couch, my roommate coming home, the shower turning on. I stood there for a while trying to understand. Maybe he went to sleep and forgot to turn it off. I shook my head. No way that happened, I thought. Maybe he slipped and fell. Realizing the implications of that, I ran towards his room, but found the bathroom door locked. I started knocking on it. "Hey man, are you okay?" No response. I thought about kicking the door in, but decided to call 911 before doing that. I grabbed my phone, preparing to dial when I noticed I had an unread message. One from my roommate. "Hey man, I couldn't sleep, so I went to my girlfriend's place. Don't know when I'll be back." Sent 2 hours ago. I look at the bathroom door, then back at my phone. Everything about this felt wrong. First, my roommate almost never texts me, and certainly never to let me know he's leaving. Second, I know for sure he's been single for a while. And third, who the hell was in the shower then? I tried calling him. No answer. Sent a few messages, but no response. I went to his desk and saw his keys and wallet still by his laptop. My head is starting to spin at this point, and I get out of there, back to the living room, and turn on the lights. I'm pacing around, trying to piece things together while also trying to ignore the shower, a noise I could never have imagined being so terrifying in any context. Sometime later, I hear something vibrating on the kitchen counter. I go over and see it's a phone. My roommate's phone. Panic starts to set in, and I immediately grab my keys and run out of the apartment. I go down the hallway and down the stairs to the lobby, but even that doesn't feel far enough. So I head to the McDonald's across the street. I sat there for a while, thinking about calling the police, but for some reason, I was too nervous to do it. But even though there were barely any people inside, the place started to feel suffocating, and I decided to leave, walking back through the empty streets. Almost immediately, I get the feeling I'm being watched, and I find my gaze rising and going toward the apartment. Soon, I'm looking at my balcony and see someone standing there. A dark figure was completely erect, stiff to the point of almost looking like a mannequin. But it wasn't. If I look closely, I can see it swaying slightly. I froze in place, my mind barely able to understand or accept what I was seeing. It's not my roommate. It's too tall. In fact, it's too tall to be anyone I know, its head almost brushing the bottom of the balcony above. Of course, my instinct was to get out of there as fast as possible. But the voice in my head was telling me that if I tried to run, this thing would end up following me. Instead, I went back to McDonald's, locking myself in the bathroom while I finally dialed 911. I told the operator that someone had broken into my apartment, but that I had left without them noticing, but they were still there. It was the story that most accurately represented the situation without making me sound crazy. The operator told me they would send someone, so I stayed waiting. I left the bathroom, waiting at the table closest to the exit until I could see the red and blue lights cutting through the darkness. I went outside to meet the police officers and looked up at the balcony, which was empty, though the living room door had been left open. They bombarded me with a bunch of questions that I found difficult to answer. Is the intruder armed? Do I have any idea who it might be? What are their intentions? I told them I didn't know, that I couldn't figure it out, but they kept asking. Soon, I was practically yelling at them to go up and check for themselves, and I suppose the terror in my voice was enough for them to start taking it seriously. They told me to wait at the entrance, and I watched as they entered the building. I stood there for a long time, growing increasingly anxious about what they would tell me when they came back down. A few minutes later, the silence was broken by a single muffled shot. My heart sank into my stomach, and I continued to wait there, not knowing what to do. Another 20 minutes of silence, and the officers still hadn't come down. Soon, I could hear more of them approaching in the distance. Before I knew it, 4 more police cars had pulled up near me, and the scene turned into chaos. Officers shouting at each other and into their radios, more questions being thrown at me, none of which I could answer. The next sequences were practically a blur, but I remember the building being evacuated, the tenants scared and confused as they were let out, while the officers became increasingly frantic. I remember hearing more scattered gunshots, some screams and other noises that were hard to understand. There are some gaps in my memory after that, but I remember being pushed into the back of a police car. After being taken to the station, I was brought into one of the interrogation rooms, where I found 2 unknown men in suits waiting for me. They didn't introduce themselves and immediately started a series of questions, each more bizarre than the last. What company did your roommate work for? What was the nature of his work? How many different people have been inside your apartment since your roommate moved in? Have you ever heard voices inside the apartment between 12 a.m. and 3 a.m.? Voices that weren't your roommates? Have you ever seen a circle of people standing outside the apartment between 12 a.m. and 3 a.m.? People who were exceptionally tall? And one of the most unsettling. Have you ever seen someone standing at the foot of your bed when you woke up between midnight and 3 a.m. only to disappear moments later? If so, do you remember what they looked like? Any distinctive features? As they continued to probe, my mind started to recall some of the strange things that happened after my roommate moved in. Things I had dismissed as figments of my imagination simply because I had no other explanation for them. I heard the voices, always coming from the room next to mine, where my roommate slept. I was always so tired when I heard them, but I remember they sounded like a young woman or a man with an extremely deep voice. I could never understand any words. It always sounded like gibberish. And then there was that time I went to the bathroom in the middle of the night. Still half asleep, I didn't bother turning on the lights when I went in. But as my eyes started to adjust to the darkness, I could have sworn someone was already sitting on the toilet. Someone extremely tall. Of course, when I turned on the lights, there was nothing there. It was easy to chalk that up to a product of nighttime drowsiness at the time, and I hadn't really thought about it since. After doing my best to provide useful information, the agents spent a few good minutes taking notes on their phones. Once they were done, they quickly got up, told me they would be in touch, and left the room. A police officer arrived a few minutes later and told me that since I couldn't go back to the apartment, they would put me up in a nearby hotel until they got the situation under control, and that I should stay there until they called me. What happened? I asked him. What did you find up there? He stared at me for a long time, not like he was deep in thought, but like he felt a deep aversion to what he was thinking of telling me. Finally, he just shook his head. I don't know, he said. I really don't know. It's now the next day, and I'm at the hotel. Of course, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat properly. The officer still hasn't called me. When I try to look up information about the evacuation online, all I find are articles claiming it was due to a fire. A damn fire. This is John Dark. Did you like the story? I recommend checking out this other video where I talk about real horror stories that happened on farms. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on more stories like these. See you next time.